2017, Tinfoil Hat Club, Scott Hensler. Ending out September, time's flying by, 2017's almost gone. Tonight, some tips on operating SDR, the fine radio, the dongle that I have posted on Tinfoil Hat Club, capable of monitoring multiple frequencies at the same time, a spectrum, and one of the tools for combating against psychotronics, against harassment, and we're going to go over that tonight. And the website link on Tinfoil Hat Club will take you to a page where you can purchase one of these. You can get them from anywhere $20 to $25. The $25 version comes with the antenna and some other accessories. And it's a USB device that you plug into your computer. Now, phones and tablets and other devices can operate as well. I don't have experience on some of the other devices except for a tablet that I had some issues with, and I'm going to go over that. But the whole idea is to spectrum monitor between 500 kilohertz and 1.8 gigahertz. Now, that doesn't mean a lot to you, and we're going to go over through some of that to help you understand this. But this is, one of the tools necessary to monitor and to keep an eye on the radio electromagnetic spectrum that is around you that can be used against you. And that's really all this is about tonight. Again, to use this, that in the office, like I do here, if someone has a chip in them that's actually transmitting, this is one of the devices that can help locate that. Are you being targeted? Do you hear, voice to skull? Are these energy weapons being, used against you? Now, I'm not really talking about scalar technology, though scalar would show up on here on the monitoring, but it's more of the VHF, the UHF, very high frequency, ultra high frequency, along with high frequency. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about all the spectrum. Again, it's just another tool to help you determine if you are being targeted. So the general radio receiver in itself can also be used in emergencies. You can listen to shortwave. You can listen to a lot of different other things, police calls, fire calls. I listen to ground air communications for the local airport here. It's quite entertaining. But again, it's just one of the tools necessary. So I mentioned on the last SDR show a few weeks ago, that was on September 2nd, that I really can't just assist you in loading the software and operating it. I just haven't got the time. It's a little complicated to load the software in. There's different versions out there, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But there's plenty of things on YouTube that will help you. There's also some quick reference or quick operating guides to help you load it up and to run it. And what I'm going to do tonight is just go over some of the basics of the operating principles to help you to determine if anything's being sent your way. All right, before I get in any further in this, again, I want to thank everyone for your support. I'm able to be on here because of you, and so thank you. And as we head into the next month, this should be some interesting times. Lots of phone calls, lots of prayers, lots of deliverances. And I'll be picking up the calls to call back again on this coming Tuesday. There is an increase in manifestations. Get some really weird calls once in a while about things. And I wanted to confirm here, if in case there's been a misunderstanding, I am taking calls. I just don't answer the phone. It isn't because people swear or whatever. It's because I don't really want to hear some witch throwing curses at me. So I let everything go to voicemail, and if it's legit, then I call back. And that's the way I've been operating now for about 2 years. Now, the increase in manifestations are coming from spouses, coming from friends, coworkers, coming from people you're meeting out on the street. A lot of the targeted individuals, because of the nature of the crime that they're doing, because that's what it is a is an abomination. It's a sin. And so those who practice such things, I can guarantee you they are infected. And if you stand there in the name of Christ, of Jesus Christ, and you rebuke them, the demon's gonna come up like a wet squeeze bar of soap. Now, even sleepwalking, spirits talking through them, all kinds of things I'm hearing about. It isn't just ones and twosies. There's a great increase. Strange dreams people are having, a lot of emails about that. Increased nightmares. Well, the point is that, as I mentioned in my book, Second Heaven Invasion, that's why I entitled it, that it's an invasion that comes in from the spirit realm, from the second heaven, from the third and fourth dimension, that in this infection and in this bombing, that's because that's what they're doing. They're carpet bombing us. That those who have open doors, who still are under curses, who have not been through deliverance, are the carrier, are the instrument, are the mode of travel, so to speak, for these things to act out their ugly nature. And that really includes everybody, because the majority of the people have not been through deliverance. So again, there you go. It's just an upswing. So, the other is people in that are concerned. They're feeling anxious. They're feeling anxieties. They know the other shoe is going to drop. They knew something's going on. And so a lot of people are very nervous in their spirit. Now, this taking a knee at the football games being orchestrated really by George Soros and his group, because everything here is for division and opposition. Just please don't fall for it. Okay? Now, back in the 70s, 80s, when was it that Reagan fired all the traffic air controllers? Just get rid of these people. Go away. You're making millions of dollars. You can go do your abuse of your wives and your girlfriends like you do. You can go snort your cocaine. You can go do whatever you want. But leave your political stuff out. The football games really is basically the people coming to see the Christians thrown to the lions. This is entertainment to keep everyone focused on things that have absolutely nothing to do with world events. And when they do this, this is their opportunity, this is their chance to publicly bring a division within this country. So don't fall for it. And again, when you're subject to this, just stay in prayer. Now, the Ring of Fire, there's a lot of activity in that. And of course, this is the volcanic line that runs, part of the western states all the way through the Pacific over towards Asia and around. That volcanoes are erupting everywhere. We've got Europe, even things over in the Atlantic Ocean, including Iceland, Alaska, Africa, India, the Indian Ocean, Mexico, the Caribbean, Philippines. With it come earthquakes. Montana, Washington, Oregon, California, New Mexico, and Oklahoma are seeing a rise in earthquakes. Maybe ones and twosies and threes, but they're there. And as I looked at the earthquake watch today, the whole western United States was just covered. Of course, California is still rock and rolling. All right. So again, just to understand, we're in a time that things are going to be accelerating. And with the weapons that are being used against us, for those who are targeted individuals, those who are gang stalked, those who are being, with these energy weapons being used against you, makes it hard to function because you're not getting your sleep, you're sick, you've got different issues. But again, I need to take a stand that as I pray for people and interview them, that the majority is demons. And I've had people in the very beginning, when I started talking about targeted individuals, trying to convince me that it was all psychotronics. Well, no, it's not. A higher percentage, by a great deal, is demons. And so don't confuse the two together. And I have taught on this, and I've talked extensively about this. And I will continue. But tonight, what we're going to do is talk about software-defined radios, the war against us. So you need to understand that this dongle, this device that plugs into your computer, is surface mount technology integration circuitry that is capable of through software manipulation, acting as if it's a coil, acting like it's a capacitor, a tuning circuit, a resonance circuit, an oscillator, an audio oscillator, all of the stuff that you find in hardware form in a radio. Some of us are familiar with the old transistor radios and even your phones, by the way. Most of that is hardwired. So there'll be software-defined more of phones coming along pretty soon. And they are to some degree, but what it means is now you can take this, bulk of components and now just use software. So now you need a computer, or you can use your phone with a dongle that plugs in, or a laptop or a tablet or whatever. And it does the simulation of all the control circuits. And I've talked about that in depth in September 2nd for software-defined radio. So what it does is on your screen, let me paint a picture for you. So you open up your laptop, you plug this thing in, you hook up your antenna to it, because if you get the $25 version, you get an antenna with it. And you plug it in the USB slot, you load in the software, which can be challenging. And when you bring it up, you now have the ability to not just listen to radio, but to visually see, like an oscilloscope or a spectrum analyzer, the whole spectrum. And meaning the whole band, not just one frequency at a time like a regular scanner. Some of you are familiar with CB radios and police scanners. And of course, remember your old TV. You had channel 2 through, 14 or 13, and then 14 and up was UHF. So you're not just hearing, you're visually seeing. And this is the key that helps us locate anything that's coming a signal your way. So if you didn't have this and someone sent a psychotronic signal to you to give you headaches, to cause nausea, to do whatever, to monitor you, to mind control, whatever, you'd miss it because of the thousands, if not millions of frequencies. Where do you start? It's a needle in a haystack. And so with the ability to see a wide spectrum increases your chance of probability of finding it. So in the midst of all that, a conventional receiver just wouldn't cut it. But it still acts as a receiver. You can listen to fire and police and aircraft and ham radio and broadcast and all of that. If you want, you can put those frequencies in memory, and they even has the ability to record what you're listening to. Okay, and that's going to come important here pretty soon. So now when you see a signal come in, otherwise kind of like a piano. Okay, let's say we're sitting in front of a player piano. Now, most of you should remember what a player piano is. You put a little scroll in there. These things came around the turn of the 19th century. And the scroll had air that was pumped through there. And when it would come to a little notch, like a computer card had a notch in it, basically the same thing, that it would cause a bellows to operate, because air could now go to that particular bellows that operated that particular key, and that key would go doing, right? You'd have a tone. Well, now when you're looking at the whole spectrum and a signal comes in, that bellows, because of the card, is allowing that key to be pressed, and you're seeing not it go down, but you're seeing it go up. And so in this wide spectrum, the key of G, F key, all of the different chords that you have now become visual in front of you. And some of you learn how to play piano that way too. And so now you're looking at it, and all of a sudden over to the left, you see this rise of a signal, which means a particular frequency that somebody is transmitting. Now, it could be ham, could be CB, could be broadcast, could be public service, could be aircraft. Who knows? It depends on what part of the band you're looking at. And I'm going to use a reference here in a little bit to help you on that as well. So I see this signal rise, and I click on it with the mouse. Boom, you're instantly listening to that frequency. Without this device, you would know what frequency to listen to, because many of the broadcasts, especially if it's police, are very short-termed. They grab the microphone, they only talk into it, you know, this is Mobile 6 or Motors 5, whatever unit they want to call it, and then they stop transmitting, and then they're waiting for the response from the control department, and so boom, boom, you missed it. But also below this little key, the keyboard, the simulation of it, is what we call a waterfall. Now, picture the old daisy wheel printers. Remember the old IBM printers, and they're tat, and the thing would, you know, go away. And a lot of the pictures were drawn by zeros and X's in the old original computers. Remember that? Okay. So what you have now is you have a printing that's taking place only visual on the screen. So then when a signal comes in, depending on its signal strength, a color changes, and just like a waterfall, picture yourself taking some dye or food coloring and walking over to the stream or the waterfall, and you put a drop in, and for that second, the waterfall in that particular place where you put the drop in now turns color. But it doesn't just go away, because it's on the computer screen, it's moving very slowly. So within, 10, 15 seconds, you're able to see that signal. Even though you missed it, it's now recorded in the waterfall, okay? So this is how we're able to look at a large amount of frequencies to determine whether you're being gang stalked, whether you're being attacked, whether you're being harassed, okay? So there you go. Now, as I mentioned, you don't just hear. That we go beyond a conventional receiver, that when you see a signal on it, you click on it, you automatically have it. Now, let's understand radio broadcasting before we go any further here. Now, let me use something that we're all familiar with, and that's AM and FM broadcasting. FM stereo. You have them in your car, you have them in your home, you used to carry them, you know, I remember you had Sony Walkmans and so forth, and some of the phones out there too have the ability to listen to AM or at least FM, okay? Now, in the broadcast spectrum, or the public broadcast, there are frequencies that are determined and assigned by the Federal Communication to only operate in these frequencies. But there's also two factors here, and that is the mode of operation. Now, the original mode used to be AM, which stands for amplitude modulation. And then in time, when things became a little more understood about how frequencies work and trying to eliminate man-made noise, otherwise all the static that you hear on the radios, they then devised FM, frequency modulation. Now, these two modes are very common even in public service. FM is widely used for police frequencies when it's analog. We're talking about the old analog systems, not digital yet, okay, versus AM. Now, AM is still used by aircraft radio. Now, FM sounds better, but amplitude goes a further distance. So since aircraft can be up 100 miles away, it's important to hear that signal to know that an aircraft is coming. So they elected to continue using AM. Even though it's a little more noisier, it goes a further distance than FM. So FM is widely used by police and fire because it's local within your city. It's not 100 miles away. It's 1 mile, 5 miles, 10 miles max, right? So this is the two modes, AM and FM. Now the signal that would be sent to you, that would be of a harassing of psychotronics, a voice-to-skull of energy weapons, could be in a different mode. So what you're going to be listening to is not really going to be intelligible. Otherwise, you're not going to hear, this is, KFNX, AM Phoenix. That's not what you're going to hear. You're going to hear some weird things. You're going to hear like science fiction noise. You're going to hear rat-a-tat-tats and clicks and all kinds of weird things. And one of the key things is that if this signal comes in, do you all of a sudden feel nauseous? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel irritated? When this signal is present, do you have a hard time sleeping? Do you hear voices in your own head? So that's really what we're looking at. So the different modes can be useful to determine later on if they change frequencies. Otherwise, you've been listening to one, and now they're on to the fact that you're on to them, and now they change frequency. So this is another reason for this broad spectrum ability, because when they change frequencies, there they are. You can find them again real fast. And then when you click on it, if it's the same tone that you got in the last one, then you pretty much know you're onto the same perpetrator, okay? So again, police, fire, CB radios, all of this stuff, they are voice. Now, they're going to data, they're going to digital, just like cell phones went to digital. And that's an interesting tone in itself, but that's very distinguishable. And it really isn't going to be too much what you'll be dealing with, and so you'll be able to distinguish that difference. But again, if it's intelligible, then most likely it's broadcast. Now, we also have Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi frequencies can be up at 2.4 to 5 gigahertz, okay? Pretty high frequencies. Now, that's not quite 5G yet. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but 3G, 4G, these particular networks that are out there, very like Bluetooth, for instance, those can be all digital. And again, they will be very distinguished between any analog frequency or any audio frequency. And so I'm not going to really pay too much attention to those, but just be aware that you will pick them up and you will see them. And one of the things that will let you know, is it your internet or your Wi-Fi or your Bluetooth, that when you use it, it will change tones, it will change beaks, little clicks, and it'll be in the signature of what you do with it. Okay, and that's how you determine to separate it from your own signals. Okay. Now, the point here is that they're all operating in the electromagnetic spectrum. Electromagnetic, very key. Electro, meaning that you were using electricity, using an exciter. We're sending a signal because of electrical pulses, not because of just magnetic. Otherwise, you know what an earth magnet is. You've got magnets on your refrigerator. Well, those have influences in the magnetic spectrum too, but not electro. Okay, so there's a difference. Don't confuse the two together. Now, some electrical lines that are in your house, I interviewed Pat last Friday, and he experienced sudden death syndrome. And he was mentioning how in his bedroom that he was subject to a magnetic field that was keeping him from sleeping. Now, that is generated by the 60 cycle electromagnetic, but what he was experiencing was the flux of the magnetic field that was bothering him. And I'm going to go into a little more about that too, because 60 hertz happens to be within our brainwave area, which is not good. Okay. So think of it this way. When we look at the spectrum, down at the lower end, just like we're sitting at the piano again, we've got the keys, we've got the low keys at the end, and we've got the high keys at the other end. It's the same way in the spectrum. So at the lower end, kind of think of it more of sound wave, a lower frequency where you could be, tapping on the table, someone speaking, a little higher frequency, a female voice, a little higher frequency, all the way up through radio wave, light wave, continuing up through X-ray and gamma at the higher end. So that would be at the keys at the higher end of the piano, so to speak. So X-ray at that higher end and gamma are are an ionizing frequency, meaning that if you're subject to it, that just like radiation, when you read rads of radiation, you know, your Geiger counters, you've seen the Geiger counters and they go click, click, click whenever there's radiation. A rad is a measurement of tissue damage, human tissue damage done by the radiation over a certain period of time. So we're allowed to have so many rads before they have determined that our tissue or our chromosomes are damaged that they will not repair themselves. Okay? So when we're talking about this ionization, we're talking about high voltage, we're talking about high frequency that's up in the X-ray gamma that is very dangerous to us. This is why they're critical about how much X-ray that you get. You know, when you go to the dentist or you get a chest X-ray or a mammogram or these things, this is subjecting your tissue to the ionization radiation. Now, when we talk about sound waves, we're talking about a non-electrical, that it's more mechanical. So what we're doing is we're inducing a vibration instead of inducing an electrical signal by influence of electromagnetics. We're causing a physical. So just like you pound on the desk, it's mechanical. So sound frequencies, when you hear them, are produced because of pressure. Like an explosion, boom, you hear a gun go off, you hear a stick of dynamite or whatever, fireworks, and it causes pressure to go through the airwaves to come into our ears and through the hammer, anvil, stirrup, the eardrum, all the way through the cochlea. Then it's transferred into a electrical pulse signal that our brain picks up, sends to the proper area, and then is reassembled again to become intelligible for us to distinguish, was it a gunshot, was it a car horn, you know, whatever. And so don't mix the two together, but please understand that you can have audio frequency and radio frequency in the same frequency, but through different means. Okay, so you can have one that's introduced by pressure or sound, or one that's induced electrically. Okay, so I want you to understand that, because some of the subsonic and ultrasonic devices that are used in harassment for psychotronics are in that range. Now, they're very directional, meaning that if they're not pointing it right at you, you may not hear. Now, that's also where voice to skull can come from. That's one of the bigger tricks of the trade, so to speak. And by the way, they can do that with laser. You'll notice that the CIA there in Langley, that their office has an outer shell around the main building. So what they've done is they've kept anyone from using parabolic ears to listen to the glass vibrate in the office. So when they have a meeting or two people are talking or someone's on a phone, because they're speaking, the glass window actually vibrates. And because it vibrates, then they can pick that up. Now, they can also do that with laser. So they can bounce a laser off of it and modulate it or demodulate it to then reinterpret it back into audio. So there's all these tricks out there. So the two can be interchangeable, but there is a definite separation of the two. Okay? All right. So when your ear picks up the sounds and it's brought to your brain for the interpretation, that one of the things that electromagnetics can do, otherwise voice to skull through electromagnetics, is to induce an electrical pulse to the cochlea, to those nerve endings, to the point of contact between the ear and your brain, and reproduce what would have been done through pressure. And now your brain hears the modulation. So you're a demodulator. You're actually now a radio receiver picking up. So this is why heavy metals, this is why toxicity, aluminums, chemtrails, beryllium, all of the stuff that they're spraying on you are causing your body to be a better antenna. And this is why some people have more susceptibility to this technology. So understand that this voice to skull can be achieved in various ways, but when it comes to radio waves, that's how they're doing it. So it's, again, it's not pressure, it's mechanical vibration when it's an audio sound wave, but electromagnetic when it's radio, okay? So in this, our electromagnetic spectrum, meaning replacing your brain with the electrical impulses, that there is a frequency and resonance of your mind. You have a signature because we all have different personalities. We all think differently. We all have different reactions to circumstances. And so they'll test you. They'll send something to you, and they'll see how you react. And by reading it back, they then map you and learn your personality. Or they send some nincompoop to you to make you mad. And while they're standing there with a cell phone that's reading your brain, they know by the words that they're saying, by what upsets you. They're pushing your buttons intentionally so they can map you. That's what they're doing. So this frequency or resonance, again, can be achieved in many different ways. Subsonic, ultrasonic, electromagnetic. But in either case, they have the ability to read you. So the Cuban psychotronic weapons that were used over in Cuba against our U.S. representatives most likely were all of the above. They were using subsonic, ultrasonic, they were using high frequency, otherwise microwave, maybe even ELF, extremely low frequency. They were using a little bit of everything. And here's the thing. Whenever you're subject to microwave, if it's high enough, you know what it does to a chicken in your microwave oven, right? Well, you can imagine what it's doing to your eardrums. You can imagine what it's doing to your brain. And so this is why these employees of the federal government, the representatives there, this is why they've gone deaf. They have permanent ear damage. Their cochleas are fried, maybe even the receptor in their brain. This is serious stuff. Now, that's through pulsing of microwave, which could very well be scalar too. I'm not weighing that out. But you need to understand that even small amounts over long periods of time become accumulative. So you may be just like X-rays. X-rays are accumulative. You can have one when you're 5, you can have one when you're 10, and you can have one when you're 50. Well, they've all done damage to you. And so even low amounts of microwave over long periods of time can do the same thing, but it just takes longer. So with the reports coming from the White House and through the agencies that are saying, well, gee, we just don't know. Well, they're lying through their teeth because these weapons, this technology was invented by us. We're the masters in this whole perpetrating against the people on this planet. That whether it's cell towers, whether it's cell phones in itself, whether there's a transmitter on a mountaintop or a van outside your house that's beaming microwave into your bedroom, we're the ones who really put this forward. Now, the Soviets did too, and the Chinese have it along with other countries. They know exactly what was used. They know what frequency, they know what amount, because they're the ones who designed it, for goodness sakes. So they know exactly what's going on. Don't believe them. Now, as I mentioned for ionizing versus non-ionizing, that they could have been subject to that as well. It could have been bursts of X-rays, could have been bursts of gammas. Now, you'll have ultraviolet also produced by this, which is very harmful to your eyes. Now, I don't know, maybe some of you may know, I don't know if they have vision problems too, but if that's the case, then most likely that's what was going on. And you know what? That's dirty. That's hitting below the belt. That's ridiculous. And the people who did this should absolutely be held accountable. So most of what we see against TIs and what we're dealing with is non-ionizing, but at a higher level of microwave. Pulsed, constant, directional, omnidirectional, all types of modes being used against us, which are detectable by this dongle that I'm telling you about. So even those that receive non-ionizing, that in itself over long term can be accumulative. So this is why a lot of you are sick. This is why your immune systems are shot. This is why you're just not snapping out of it. Alzheimer's, look, aluminum, and now it's being energized by radio waves. Wow, big stuff. So this is, very concerning that X-ray over the years, as I've mentioned, can be every bit as bad, but high bursts of microwave can do the same thing. So let's look at the specifics of the effects on us and what to look for so we can look for them, okay? Now, again, scalar can be used, but I'm talking about what's referred to as transverse wave, meaning the regular radio waves that we're used to, okay? Now, when we talk about scalar, we're really talking about DARPA, we're talking about CIA, we're talking about Pentagon, we're talking about Black Ops, we're talking about the big boys, okay? We're not talking about jerk that goes down or off the internet buys one of these devices to give you a hard time. Scalar's a little more sophisticated and can be more directional or omnidirectional. That is what will duplicate an EMP, okay, to give you an idea of the potential strength behind scalar. So we're talking about regular traverse wave, not Tesla wave, because that's what scalar was. So we have gang stalkers with cell phones or like devices that look like cell phones. We have agents with higher power, maybe computer-operated devices that can read your mind, to map your mind, to manipulate you, even in mind control. These may be the ones you find in the vans or the other vehicles that are outside your house, okay? We also have satellite technology. We also have cell towers. Cell towers in themselves, capable of such wide bands, are right there at the lower end of their spectrum for our higher end of mind control. And it's not by mistake, it was by design. So let's just look at the frequencies in itself, all right? Voice to skull frequencies are also part of hypnotic frequencies. Now, one of the main frequencies used in this is 400 megahertz and up. Take note of this, because this is where I'm going to be pointing you with this software-defined radio to really examine the spectrum more than the others for now, is 400 megahertz and up. Now, some of this is the old TV frequencies. Remember the UHF frequencies that when they went digital, they left these bands and they went somewhere else? So these things are wide open, unallocated for anybody to use. This is the other problem that we have here. So a lot of the stuff that's being sold out there is in that upper frequency range. Now, we also have issues with 1 gigahertz and up. So at 400 megahertz and 1 gigahertz, which is a billion and up, we're talking about cell phones in the 1 gigahertz and up. We're talking about ham radio. We're talking about different commercial frequencies as well. So when you see a police car that has a very short antenna, chances are that's about 1.2 gigahertz, 1.4 gigahertz frequency range. And chances are, too, that they've probably gone digital. But the voice of God frequency is around 450 megahertz. Now, I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's voice to skull, basically meaning that they could tell people that it's God that they're listening to. You hear it in your head, and you don't know the difference, because most people who really aren't up on this wouldn't know. But don't mistake that for demons. Demons can do the same thing. So about 450 megahertz is the voice of God weaponized technology. Now, ELF, extremely low frequency, is one that can bring not only mind control, but physical issues to a body. Now, your body in itself emits about 100 hertz signal. I don't know whether you knew that or not. So that's one of the reasons they can read your signature. This is why when a drone goes over, because it's trying to scan the ELF frequencies that it doesn't need infrared to pick you up. It doesn't need a camera to pick you up. It has to just pick up 100 hertz. Now, our body, again, in that range can be from 0 to 300 hertz. Now, note that in that range, we have 60 hertz cycle of radio of your power in your house. Okay, not too much different than what your body's radiating. So they're all real close together here. Now, some of you have heard about GWEN towers, Ground Wave Emergency Network. Now, this was implemented during the Cold War. So if anyone tells you that ELF or HF is not going to work during nuclear fallout, they either don't know what they're doing or they're intentionally lying to you. Because there's been a lot of devices that they've tried to sell out there to you to make you think that you can still communicate via servers and all of this other stuff. Sorry, not going to happen. HF, ELF, and these bands, this is why the U.S. Navy put 58. They originally wanted to put over 200 of these towers out there. They have 58, trying to spread them about 300 miles apart. We've got one here in Spokane, Washington, just to my left. And this is like a network, kind of like servers or the internet, but via radio wave. So if a bomb goes off, let's say in New York, then you still have New Hampshire, you still have Pennsylvania, you still have Illinois that can still communicate and still communicate all the way across the country. And that was the whole plan, still in place. But the problem is that this frequency of VLF, 150 to 175, averaging 2,500 watts, that's a lot of power, believe me, is also part of our system and our alpha beta wave. As I go through some of this, you'll find that some of it is also resonant, harmonics, spurious. I know you're probably not really sure what I'm talking about. Maybe some of you who are very familiar with music know what I'm talking about. But in itself, these also are dual band sites that do UHF 225 to 400 megahertz. Again, and the voice to God weaponized technology. So these things are all over the country, changing and altering our moods, making us feel euphoric, making us feel depressed, and potentially putting voices in our head. So let's take a look at the human brain. Now, I've gone over some of this before, but I want to reiterate it to make sure when I close out here what you need to look at. Okay, concentration and visual, your alertness, is your beta between 13 and 40 hertz. Okay, not too far below the 60 hertz in your house. Your alpha, meaning your consciousness, your awareness, which is very close to the Schumann resonance, which is the resonance, the normal ringing of our Earth. So we're in harmony with our consciousness, our awareness of our Earth. But there's also information because of HARP and some of the other things that the frequency is actually increasing, which again can add to our anxiousness. With our consciousness, then obviously then you're beyond conscious. You're not operating correctly. So that runs from 7 to 12 hertz. You might want to record that. And then the theta. So we have beta, alpha, theta. Theta from 4 to 7 hertz is our twilight state. Meditation, drifting to sleep, dreaming, even part of learning, because sometimes we through that conscious can put things in place in our memory. Then we get to delta. Now delta is interesting because it's almost from 0 to 4 hertz. So remember I talked about vibration? Remember I talked about radio wave potentially both being of the same? You can see then the influences of music, how music and vibration. Have you ever been on a washboard road? Have you ever been where someone's banging on a table and it drives you nuts? Well, we're interfering with basically beta, alpha, theta, waves. And so when we're talking about 0 to 4 hertz, we're talking about our deep REM sleep, growth hormones being released, body repair, healing, regeneration. And so you can see that through the Gwen towers and all the other systems that we really don't get our sleep, we really don't regenerate. Now, high gamma activity at 30 hertz and up in our brains can be what is part of their attempt to cause us from having our peace. So our bodies are in a constant, perpetual motion of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Anxiousness, never getting any rest away from it. Now, I want you to understand this too, that in order to create a radio wave, we have to have oscillation. We have to have a sinusoidal wave. We have to have something that creates a alternating current, just like AC in your house, this oscillation. But unfortunately, our brains do not oscillate. They are a pulse. So when we see something, there's a signal sent out like a digital signal, and it comes back. So our brain communicates not in an oscillation, but it's actually at scalar speed, not light speed. Scalar is 291,000 miles per second versus the speed of light at 186,000. But it pulses so quickly. So a pulse goes out and a pulse comes back. It doesn't go back and forth like you're playing badminton. That's not how it works. But unfortunately, because radio wave does operate that way, that our brains are now subject to a bidirectional oscillation, bidirectional electrical influences. And so this in itself is firing our brains in a non-normal state that in itself can cause confusion, agitation, loss of memory, the signals that would have normally gone to our immune system or to anything else, body functions. They can make you lose control of your bowels. They can make you, many of the people that I've had to work with now wear Depends. And it is because of this system. And this is one of the reasons, because of the oscillation causing bidirectional instead of a unidirectional, that your brain is damaged. Mental illness, sickness, sleeplessness, confusion, anger. Again, 60 hertz in your home. Now you know why that friend of mine, Pat, couldn't sleep. He was in a high 60 hertz magnetic field. And by the way, that is read by a different type of meter. That's one that reads Gaussing, gusses, how much magnetic flux is there. So some of you have those meters. Hold on to them because they're just as valuable as anything else I'm going to talk about. So devices on my website that I've posted, very much like the EMF Acousticom 2, you'll see that there, 200 megahertz to 800 gigahertz as a tool that I use, that it reads accumulative. Otherwise, it doesn't give you an exact measurement. It just gives you a go or no go. Is there a signal there or is there no signal there? If there is it at a harmful level? So if you can afford the $200, I'm telling you, you need to have it. Because when you sit in front of your computer and you're using Wi-Fi, you're sitting in a very dangerous magnetic field that has been already addressed and already deemed by NIOSH and OSHA and the World Health Association that it is not for your benefit. And that meter will tell you that. So in its best state, in your environment, you're always subject to these radiation. So monitoring these frequencies and understanding them can help you eliminate the threat to you. So as I mentioned before, this meter, unfortunately, the Acousticom doesn't tell you what frequency. It only tells you the amount that it's there, doesn't tell you the mode. But that's where the dongle comes from. That's where the software-defined radio comes in, is that it can tell you what mode. It can tell you what frequency. And then from there, you can record it. All right? All right. So again, this is where the SDR dongle comes in. And so in the band spread, when you look at the whole spectrum, you're able then to determine very quickly what frequency, what amplitude, what mode it's in, and does it repeat? Does it keep coming back? Do I get nauseous and sick when that signal is there? Now, with the oncoming of 5G, okay, that's basically 24 gigahertz and up. There's really not much we can do right now with that. Most of the devices out there that are on the internet would cost you $1,000 and up to monitor it, which is out of the price range for most people. Now, in time, that will change. But the best thing for us would be not to even have 5G. So let's stick to what we can do, and so that's to use the dongle. So remember, as I mentioned before, let's focus on 400 megahertz. This does seem to be the frequency most used for those to inflict voice to skull, irritability, and to basically cause confusion. So that's what we're going to target. So this is, again, one they use for harassment, mind control, and so on. So as an example, now that the dongle is, hooked up to your computer, you've got the antenna plugged in, okay? You've got the software up and running. This is, again, one of your best abilities to see what's going on. So again, on my website, let me address this real quickly. The links that I have to purchase that, I don't sell them. I have nothing to do with this. I'm simply giving you the links to these. For 20, 25 bucks around that area, you can have one of these things. Plug it into your computer. I also have different links for the software. Because remember, it's somewhat of a device that you plug in, but it's mostly software driven. So AirSpy is for free, and I have the link for that. So when you buy the device, you can download the software, and there's many different versions out there. But I want you to note that on my notebook, which runs Windows 10, I couldn't get it to work. But I could get it to work on my desktop computer for Windows 7 and 8 and my laptop, but not my notebook computer. Well, what I ended up doing is I found another software that would load on my Windows 10, and that is called Sdr Console version 3. So that's what I ended up using on there, and it seems to work just as fine. So I loaded this software, and please understand, you may have to go to the instructions of the suppliers of these devices to load this software in. It's not plug and play. Some of it's a little more user-friendly than others, but if you're not really familiar, you may have to go to the rtl-sdr.com website for their quick start guide. I recommend doing it anyways. It'll kind of give you an idea how to operate, gives you some tips. Now, most of the operations for this you can find on YouTube. There's lots of people who demos, who show you how to install it. The applications are endless. Listening to police, listening to fire, listening to ham, listening to military, listening to all kinds of things. And it's through that usage or that operation you can learn yourself how to find the device or the frequencies that are being used against you. So I recommend doing that. So I'm going to be referencing tonight off of September 2nd, as I did for titled Software Defined Radio, that when you have this all together, then as you proceed forth, that with the running of the software and having the antenna connected, you'll see again, as I mentioned before, what's called the waterfall. And when you see this across your screen, this is a recording of the activity that's taking place. Meaning if a signal comes in, even if you weren't looking, you could still reference to it later because it's being recorded. It stays on the screen for a time, kind of like when someone takes a picture and you got that flash in your eye and you see that flash for a while and then it eventually goes away. It's kind of the same thing. So all we're doing is monitoring the band, the 400 megahertz. We're going to use 400 megahertz for the center of the band. To the right are the higher frequencies of 104 or 405, 410, 415, just like the piano keys off to the right. And then to the lower, you've got 395, 390, 385. Okay, so we're looking at the whole spectrum. not just the one frequency. So as we're looking at it and looking at the whole entire band, not just looking at one frequency, we're seeing all activities take place. Now, depending if you're in a populated area and there's a lot of commercial activity and a lot of different things going on, you'll see a lot of signals. So just because you see a signal doesn't mean that's the one that's targeting you. But what you're doing again is now that you can visualize and maybe even hear it, depending on what mode that it comes in, that you're looking for repeatability. You're looking for something that continues to keep happening to you that you can say, hey, that's the frequency that takes place. So now once you have that in place, whether it's FM, AM, SSB, meaning single sideband, there can be frequency shift key in the different modes. Right now, we're not really too concerned about that. We're really concerned about just seeing it, locking onto it, and knowing that it exists and recording that frequency, okay? So a visual point of reference, because what you're going to be hearing is going to be intelligible anyways. So if you say signal, when it happens, that's it. So do you get sick? Do you get headaches? Can't sleep? Agitated? Confused? And so forth, all right? So if you've found this and have found that is the offending wave, and you can now listen to it because now you want to listen to it. Now you want to try and determine what does it sound like, because you may need to use that later on, because they can do what they call frequency hopping. So they can spread spectrum, they call it. So all of a sudden, boom, it comes in at 400, then it may be at 405. Okay, and that's another way to find out if they're using that technology, because it's bouncing around, but you're still getting the same effect. But when you click on it, is it the same noise that's being made on the other frequency? Because the likelihood of the same frequency or the same noise being generated by these frequencies is pretty, it's just not going to happen. There's a lot of versatility out there. So it'll help you find it no matter what they change it to. So this in and itself is a quick way to find the signature of those things that's making you feel sick. So anyways, this takes time and it takes patience. I don't know if some of you have that. I'm just giving you this information that if you're really serious about finding this, it's going to take some patience and time, and it's going to take some skill. But if you are being targeted and you take the time, you're going to find it. Now, again, as I mentioned, this is only one of the tools necessary to find these things, that these demonized, possessed people, these wankers that are doing this to you, these lowlifes, these flying monkeys, these hyenas, these demon-possessed people. Now, there's another option here. You can also hit record and record it. And the reason for this is for documentation, because you need to remember, what are they doing? They are broadcasting. Do they have a license? Are they allocated for that frequency? Are they jammers? Are they doing something that violates Part 15, Part 97 of the Federal Communications? And you have a right to file a complaint. Do you understand that? And when you file a complaint, it goes in, it's documented. They've got to come out and investigate it, okay? And if they find, let's say that someone puts a transmitter in an apartment and they don't live in the apartment, they just leave the transmitter and they come back once in a while to verify that it's working. Then when the FCC comes out with their sniffers, their fox hunters, they can sniff it right down. And because of the violation, then they get a hold of the FBI, and the FBI comes and kicks the door down. Do you understand? This is let's use the government back at them, all right? So we need to understand that if you look outside your house, is there a van parked out there that normally is not part of the neighborhood? This may be one of the keys to know that you're being targeted by someone in these vans. Okay? Could be anybody. Could be at any time. And so again, we need to understand that we're not going to take it any longer. Now, in reality, a Faraday cage is really your only protection. against this stuff. You can buy these things you put around your neck. Now, Julie Flores was selling the necklaces that was more for keeping Wi-Fi down. Big difference. If this is weaponized against you, you're talking about higher powers that these things will not stop. So this stuff that you're seeing out there, don't waste your money. Because everyone I've talked to, and in theory of radio waves called propagation, it's not even a reality. But everyone I've talked to finally says, you know what, it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because in order to stop. Okay, let me paint a picture here for you. Okay, so you go to the beach, and someone sells you this little packet of sunblock. And you get to the beach and you get down to your bathing suit and you open up this package of sunblock, and it's a piece of electrical tape about 6 inches long, about a ½ inch wide. And it says, put it across your chest. This is how it's going to block the sun. So in your ignorance, you think, well, they must know what they're talking about. So you take this black piece of electrical tape and you put it across your chest. 2 hours later, you're in trouble. You're burnt. You're running around like you're on fire. Now, what's amazing is when you remove the electrical tape, they're right. They stop the sun from coming to what was underneath the electrical tape. But your whole body was still burnt to a crisp. And these devices are pretty much nothing more than an electrical tape across your chest. You need to understand that because radio waves come in direction, they come in OMI, they come in from the top, they come from the bottom, they come from the sides. When they are higher frequencies, they bounce off of everything. They'll bounce off of your TV, they'll bounce off of you, they'll bounce off of your coffee maker. Okay, so they come at you in all directions. This is why satellites use different types of antennas, because the radio wave can rotate. Instead of being vertical, it can become horizontal or somewhere in between. So just understand that in reality, in these cases, a Faraday cage, which surrounds you 100%, is really the only way to protect you. Now, of course, the whole thing here would be to stop it altogether in getting your life back. But unfortunately, right now, that's not going to happen. When 5G comes, then we are really in trouble. Whether you're mapped or not, 5G is a whole different animal. And you need to understand that what they're going to do against us is definitely part of genocide, crimes against humanity, and the younger generation, the unborn in the womb, the amount of chromosome damage to the fetus, this is unacceptable. And there needs to be more in opposition about this. All right. All right, I hope that makes some sense to you. Running out of time here. So again, patience. Look at some of the videos on YouTube on how this stuff operates. If you're being attacked, one of the things I do is to make sure that it isn't demons, right? I define whether it's one or the other. Finding a higher case of demonization that I am psychotronics. But some of you are targeted. And this is one of the tools to fight back. All right. Again, thank you for helping me out here and keeping me going. And on Monday, Lord willing, we'll see what comes up, and I'll start my calls again on Tuesday. All right. Any questions? I'll take a few questions for emails, but I just can't help you load the program. I don't have the time for it. It's a doozy sometimes, so follow those instructions. God bless.